So this video will evaluate and reflect on the ESPRIt Hallmark initiative, featuring interviews with co-chairs Professorial Fellow Guillaume Kalb, who is affiliated to the Melbourne Institute of Applied Economic and Social Research, Faculty of Business and Economics at the University of Melbourne, and Belinda Hewitt, Professor of Sociology in the School of Social and Political Sciences, Faculty of Arts, University of Melbourne. This video will also cover interviews with each of the project groups that receive funding from the ESPRIt initiative. So the Economic and Social Participation Hallmark Research Initiative, ESPRIt, started in March 2017 to explore how participation in social, economic, and political institutions can be enabled across the lifespan, and in a way that is equitable and unaffected by an individual's age, gender, socioeconomic status, ethnic, or racial background. So ESPRIt's main instrument involved providing seed funding to kickstart research, focusing on stimulating interdisciplinary research on the aforementioned topics. It also included joint events, getting people together from across disciplines, policymakers, industry, and academia.
In 2016, Belinda Hewitt and myself saw this opportunity for setting up a Hallmark. And we are both really interested in labor market participation, as well as social participation of individuals. And we were keen to extend our network to other disciplines who may be looking at the exact same questions as we are looking at. So our aim was to set up a network through the Hallmark of other people interested in social and economic participation and involve as many disciplines as we could.
So when Guillaume and I were conceptualizing ESPRIt, one of the big things that we really wanted to focus on was providing opportunities for early career researchers. So, so seed funding is kind of perfect for early career researchers in that it offers a small amount of money. It's a manageable project, especially for people who haven't managed a big project before. And it just helps them launch their ideas or get their ideas off the ground. So it was really, the pots of money were designed to do proof of concept stuff. So we really had a focus, especially in the first round, we actually had a real focus on providing seed funding for early career researchers to get there, to collaborate with other like-minded early career researchers across the university, and to give them the opportunity to get their ideas off the ground or to test their ideas, which with the idea that this would lead into potentially a discovery or a longer term collaboration for them. And of course, seed funding, because it's a seed, not all seeds grow. So we weren't totally expecting 100% success rate with everything. And, you know, one of the interesting things was some of the problems that people had with the seed funding, getting the teams to work together, getting the collaborations working once the application had gone in and been successful. And the other thing is some of the ideas were slightly out there and a bit crazy and may not have been funded through traditional funding channels. And so just giving a small pot of money to a sort of very innovative, crazy idea could actually get something bigger happening. And in some cases it did, like it really genuinely did. In some cases it didn't, because the ideas were a little bit too ambitious for the amount of money that was available.
My name is Dr. Kate Raynor, and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow. And when I was working with this ESPRIt project, I was a postdoc doing affordable housing research at the Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning. And now I'm doing my second postdoc also at Architecture, Building and Planning, and still in the affordable housing space.
And there's Julie and myself, who are econometricians from the Melbourne Institute. And our real main aim in this project is to pull together all of the data and try and establish proof of concept by doing some preliminary analysis.
I'm Ankur Singh, and I'm a research fellow in social epidemiology and lecturer in epidemiology at the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health within the Faculty of Medicine, Health Sciences and Dentistry. And really excited to be in this interview.
Yep, I'm Holly Lawford-Smith, and I'm a senior lecturer in political philosophy, so in the School of Historical and Philosophical Studies, and I've been at UniMelb since 2017.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lauren Bliss from the School of Culture and Communication within the Faculty of Arts. I'm a lecturer and tutor in media and communication there.
So I am Victor Soho. I am a senior lecturer in leadership in the Department of Management and Marketing at the University of Melbourne.
I am a senior lecturer in the Grad School of Education, and this Hallmark grant actually gave us an opportunity to think really differently about what co-research might look like and what a kind of inter-faculty but then interdisciplinary project might look like with a number of different people and practices doing multiple things both across the university but also into a wider network. So I guess I wanted to read this because this is an important outcome of our project. Yeah. Catherine Coleman, Sarah Healy, Niels Wouters, Jenny Martin, Leah Campbell, Sam Peck, Amanda Belton and Rose Hiscock are an interdisciplinary team behind an ongoing University of Melbourne Science Gallery Melbourne collaboration. We are the custodians of the SciCurious Research Project, which is an intergenerational research collective. Across our collective, we have collaborators who identify as artists, designers, engineers, scientists, coders, biologists, researchers, and inter-trans and pre-disciplinarians who aren't defined by disciplinary labels. What we are is SciCurious. The conceptual collaboratory offers us a space to explore SciCurious, SciCurious as method, and SciCurious as becoming. Now that's a biographical note that we now refer to ourselves as a collective rather than a group of individuals. Yeah. And this Hallmark was a catalyst for that because it offered, like many seeded grants like this, an opportunity to have some funds to pay some people to be in an interdisciplinary project, which is really required.
So I was wondering, would you mind sharing some details about the main aim of the project that was funded through the seed funding stream of the ESPRIt initiative?
Mm-hmm. So the research project was really interested in two public housing estates in Melbourne, one that was going through a period of regeneration, was about to go through a period of regeneration, and one that went through a very similar process, but maybe 10, 15 years earlier. And what we were interested in is whether having mixed communities that mix social housing and market housing in the same place lead to better social integration or lead to less stigmatization of members of the public housing community.
The main aim of the project was to establish proof of concept, broadly speaking, for a bigger research agenda, which aims to look at the impact of settlement in Australia and the violence that is associated with it on Indigenous outcomes, on the outcomes of Indigenous Australians today.
A close to practice research in a professional learning community was really looking at pinpointing what the identities, understandings and knowledges of creativities were and looked like, but also a reason for belonging. Why did this group of young people who are associated in an important leadership role at the gallery choose to come together and work together as this professional learning community? And what could we learn from them?
I think the project was about theoretical explanations for explaining social inequalities in multi-morbidity. And it's very interesting now because we're living in a moment of public health crisis, which is all about multi-morbidity, as you know, that people who experience underlying morbidities are at a much higher risk of getting COVID infections as well as the most severe outcome. And there is evidence of social inequalities in multi-morbidity internationally, including COVID-related deaths and things like that. Yeah. So very interestingly, that's what the target was, looking at interventions that can be based on theories that may explain how social inequalities lead to multi-morbidity.
Yeah, so the project itself, we wanted to know how gender equality in the workplace in particular is discussed in the Australian media. things like whether it's discussed critically or favorably in general. And then we were really interested in what kinds of arguments or reasons end up being offered in support of or against gender equality. We thought the media is particularly interesting because it's one of the main vehicles by which ideas are kind of communicated to a broad public audience. And that if we could gain a really solid understanding of what that narrative was like, we'd be in a good position to think about what was going well there and then maybe what needed to change, like what opportunities there were for communicating better there.
I was working with Dr. Alex Bacalja, who is a lecturer in the Melbourne Graduate School of Education. And we were looking at the types of texts that are being listed for study for VCE English, which is Year 12 English, the final year of high school here in Victoria.
So we had two multidisciplinary projects, both of them about social equity issues. The first one was about identifying employment pathways for people from asylum seeking and refugee background. The second project was about identifying the narratives that people in the Australian community and in the media are running around workplace gender diversity.
I was wondering whether you could shed some light on how everything came together in this project.
It was actually really interesting. And I think it was valuable to do it this way because of those different perspectives, but it also made the process a lot longer because we were speaking very different languages and coming from very different perspectives, and potentially even more than a disciplinary difference was a methodological difference because the team I was working with were all very quantitative researchers. I'm a qualitative researcher generally. So we had a really interesting time kind of talking stats at each other from very different disciplinary backgrounds.
I'm assuming that both of you have worked with interdisciplinary teams before. So is the project team size and maybe where people are based important? So you were just referring to the one-day meeting. Did you come out together all physically, or was this a virtual meeting?
It was a physical meeting, yeah. But I guess just thinking about what Julie said about, and I guess more generally about the question that you asked about how do you make an interdisciplinary team work and the multidisciplinary nature of it and working around an objective. I think the thing that made our project work is that it wasn't just a group of people who were sort of semi-colleagues who know each other and got together and tried to dream up an idea. This was a case where we had a very clear idea that was, without shadow of doubt, could only be addressed using multidisciplinary team. So to answer your question about how to make it work and the objectives of it, I think that it has to have multifacets that mean you can carve off pieces, like Julie said, so that we can give each person a piece of the puzzle to go away and work on, but then bring it all back so that ultimately we're solving a puzzle, not just working on individual pieces. So it was certainly a project that lent itself to interdisciplinary research.
And so I guess to complement that, there were essentially multidisciplinary tasks to be done, and we went around it the other way. So there was the idea, and then we thought, oh, who can we actually contact to join the project?
And how did you come in contact with all of these people? Is that through the community of the University of Melbourne, or is that through the individual network of people?
Individual networks, I think. It's why I was drawn to the ESPRIt grant, because as someone in education, but also coming from museum education and digital research, those connections and networks for me are really important, because to do interdisciplinary research, you need to always be engaged in people who believe in the interdisciplinary. And maybe sometimes no discipline at all. It's just, we're in this because we have no idea what we might find. And so those curious people were the ones that we really wanted to connect with. And again, lovely opportunity of these hallmarks is, who do you really want to work with? And you just go, I've got this crazy idea. I'm going to write this grant. Are you in on it with me? And everybody said yes. And I didn't really know most of those people prior, but it developed into this, amazing team of people who were ready to roll on a kind of unknown. I really set out on a what if. What if we investigated? So curious. What if we worked with this team? What if we rethought what research might be as a co-research with young people? And then we get the, can we still do this once COVID happens? And
So
it became the what ifs just kept growing.
I was wondering, how did you connect with the people of the computer science team?
Yeah, I can't actually, I think maybe Victor just used the UniMelb find an expert or something.
That's good advertising. Yeah, it works.
Because it was funny, because we'd been having these conversations with like researchers at other universities, and there was various problems there. Like, I can't remember exactly what went wrong, but I think we had 2 or 3 prospective partners internationally, and we were having to have these Skype meetings at Vic Health trying to connect with this particular partner, and then that not really working out. And yeah, and then we just found Karen, who's amazing, and just like at UniMelb just across the campus. So yeah, that was great. And when we all sort of met up in person, there was a really good synergy. Like, we all enjoyed working together. Yeah, so that was cool, actually.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Given the experience now together with Alexander, would you embark on another interdisciplinary collaboration again with Alexander or with someone else, like an economist?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, it was really valuable. And I think, especially because it's targeting early career researchers, we don't get a lot of opportunities to meet other colleagues, and also to share our research and to find where we can create research projects together.
It's been a great experience for me, to lots of lessons learned as well, at a very early career stage. So I really, and I'm the kinds of projects ESPRIt has funded as well are all very different. You may have, those interviews, you may have realized that. So it's very interesting to see the outcome, and also like what would be the next steps of this would be very interesting to know as well.
So that's what I tried to touch upon also with the other project teams and with Belinda and Guillaume, that we, as researchers, we quantify impact in a relatively short amount of time. But with these interdisciplinary projects, it takes a long time because before anything happens. So 1 or 2 years. And then the long-term impact, perhaps on the researchers themselves, could be over 10 or 20 years. In terms of, you've now experienced interdisciplinary research, perhaps you will do it as a similar thing again.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, because that's pretty much exactly our shape. Like, it was like nothing, and then sort of feeling like guilty and like, oh, we should get onto that. And then it was like a real sudden sort of burst of like, yeah, it's all coming together, and we've got everyone, the RAs are all doing the job, and we're checking in, and it's all kind of coming together, and interesting findings. And yeah, and I think it was a good team, and we're sort of talking about what to do next. Like, we always wanted to do an industry report and an academic paper, so I'm sure there might be various more things coming out of that in the future.
So would you mind to share some details about the synergy between you, Lauren, and Alexander? So what did the two of you bring in terms of interdisciplinary collaboration, and what was the key value added of each member?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know Alex before this project. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and he was really keen to apply for ESPRIt, knowing that it was interdisciplinary. And he had this idea to study VC text selection, which really interested me because my background is mainly in feminist film and media theory. So I've always been interested in representation, inclusivity, how people, identities, cultures get represented. And Alex's area is primarily in literacies and the study of the curriculum. So the two of us together, like we complemented each other really well, I think.
The way you described your collaboration, it sounds as a very open and great learning environment, which is one of the key goals of the ESPRIt initiative. So were there specific things the team did early on or during the collaboration to come to such an awesome dynamic?
I think we defined roles very clearly. We proposed 2 papers, and on those papers, it was sort of very clear from early that which of the collaborators are going to lead on which kind of, methodology. That was one thing. However, it was open to everyone's inputs, but obviously we had some sort of delegation of roles in those terms. The second thing, what we did was we were meeting quite frequently in the beginning, so that we understand each other's language, as you said, and also in terms of getting to know the disciplinary norms of people. So a lot of discussions quite early really helped us to form, the basis that we want to deliver. And I think it was all about being open to others' ideas and others' methodologies and theoretical positioning, So I think we all were quite accommodating in those terms. But that is what we learned through the ESPRIt, because I think in a way we were put in a situation that we had to do it. Otherwise the project will not go forward. So it tells you, it makes you learn how interdisciplinary teams need to function. And that's the future, of any funding body now requiring, really.
Yeah, I imagine it's a great experience and a useful experience. So then in a nutshell, I think there are a couple of things that you mentioned already. So one is good communication, verbally from the outset of the project, dedicating specific roles to the team members. And in the end, spend a lot of time. So it just takes time to understand each other better or understand the concepts and the theories better. And Julie, do you have some key do's and don'ts in the context of interdisciplinary collaborations?
So a bit like Kane, I've done a few, but also I can only think of the ones that worked. So I don't know if it's because it's always worked or I forgot about the bad experiences. But from the positive experiences that I had, I think there are a few things that are important. One clearly is that everyone knows what he has to do, has a clear role, clear tasks, and clear outputs that he needs to produce. There needs to be willingness to be part of an interdisciplinary project paper. Because as Kane was saying, we all speak different languages, and so it does require a bit of energy, and you need to be patient with others as well when you don't understand. You need to ask questions, and they need to be able to at least to try and answer them. So the willingness and the patience is important.
So then if you think about the value added of the ESPRIt, you're basically funding, starting, to kickstart projects, seed funding. So the ultimate goal is that it's a seed, so it will grow bigger over time in a way that worked out pretty well. For example, then you have the follow-up project with Laura.
No, it was really useful. There is absolutely no way I would have met that team if I hadn't have come along to the ESPRIt startup meeting. And I actually really liked the way that meeting was facilitated and the focus on asking teams to come up with ideas in the room rather than just, letting people meet each other and then go away and then potentially lose all of those seeds of those ideas that were born. So I think that's a massive value add to even have just facilitated that initial meeting. And of course, without money, there's not a lot of reason to do it. But because there was funding, it suddenly became, a plausible project and a really beneficial thing to do.
Look, the only thing I can really think of reflecting on our process was just like setting regular meetings so that it's not ad hoc. So maybe you just have the last Friday of the month and then you're always kind of checking in. I mean, I think we kind of did that reasonably well, but it was ad hoc. And so it meant that when things were busy, it could sort of slip. and maybe also delegating someone as taking responsibility for making that happen?
We definitely did work primarily in our areas of expertise. But then also, I think one of the other good things with Alex and I is that we're good at editing each other too, and very open to each other. Because obviously, you know, when you're writing, you know, a peer-reviewed paper, sometimes your sentences aren't great or the ideas aren't very well formulated or whatever. But it's hard to, you know, you really have to be open to getting feedback from each other and not taking it personally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we academics can be stubborn, so that also doesn't help. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to be open. It should be feasible to speak what you think and improve each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the first thing is that you need to respect other people's expertise. Okay, in a multidisciplinary research project, you need to listen to everybody who is at the table and respect the fact that they do have knowledge to contribute. Okay, so that will be the first thing. The second thing is that there has to be a very clear distribution of labor within the team. Okay, so once you have understood what kind of expertise is there, you need to allocate tasks in a way that really brings up the best of what people have to offer to the team. And I think you need to have some very clear goals of what you want to achieve. So if it's going to be industry publication, perfect, just name it, right? And explain what that will look like. And the same with the academic papers, but you need to have some clear goals. So those will be the things that I reckon will be helpful.
Yeah, nice, Victor. So yeah, I think we, during my interviews with many other teams, a couple of things came up which closely align with what you were saying. So be clear from the outset who is going to do what. Put people in the place where their expertise is most beneficial used. Yeah, expectation management. It's okay to take a long time. I think especially in the context of interdisciplinary research, where you need more time for overcoming the language barrier perhaps and communication, which is all fine, but it's also important to set some deadlines. And if you miss the deadlines, that's also fine, but still we need some incentive to work hard.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting for the project with Vic Health, the deadlines were very clear because they needed to do things before the end of the financial year. So we were all working towards that specific day where this had to be wrapped up. So yeah, I think that definitely helped.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, related to Vic Health, I was wondering, you mentioned you started that collaboration or you set up the relationship. Do you have some key advice on involving stakeholders outside of academia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are many things that you could do to start creating these connections, right? And in my case, when I have done research that I know has clear policy implications, I prepare briefing notes and I send it to the relevant people within those institutions, okay? So I'm talking about chief of staff of ministers or my contacts in any of these organizations that could use the information. So in the case of Vic Health, that's what we did, you know, and I'm talking about 10 years ago. And then they started inviting me to give presentations about the outputs of my research and then to be in task forces that they are creating. And that means that, you know, you have a connection there, right? Yeah. And whenever there is some discretionary funding, right, that could be allocated and what you're doing is aligned with what they need, they reach out to you. And that has been the case with many other organizations that I work with. So you do a fair bit of work for free in a way, you know, where you're just transferring knowledge just out of, you know, whenever you have time to do it. But if you understand that there is a good connection to be created there and you stick around, there could be really good opportunities that might emerge 5 years, 10 years, you know, down the track.
Yeah, I see that more as an investment strategy. So short term, it takes time, long term, you reap the benefits, but you need to be perseverant to benefit from it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's interesting.
And for early career academics, right, don't put all your eggs on that basket, right? So you need to be producing high impact classic academic outputs, okay? At the same time that you're creating these connections that will pay off, you know, like years down the track.
I just add one more thing on that I said earlier is basically like that value added and identifying that like unless you start chatting with people from outside your discipline, you won't get that where they can contribute as well.
Yeah.
That is something of also building networks across disciplines, so that that you build that understanding of somebody else's work and where they can contribute as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, with the idea of wrapping up the ESPRIt, I was thinking, what could we do? And then I came up with the suggestion to do these video interviews, because for me, this would be a great opportunity to meet all of you, because I didn't know you before. And it's great to hear all these stories from people from different backgrounds, talking about research in all these different domains. So yeah, that was for me the main value added of doing these interviews. And yeah, thank you so much, Ankur, for this interview. So the one of the main goals was to stimulate interdisciplinary research partnerships, both across and outside the university. And from your perspective, Guion, has this been achieved?
Yeah, I think it has been achieved. So I think one of the really nice things to see happening sort of in this later phase of our Hallmark is to see people who started collaborating on a seed funding grant a few years ago continuing this collaboration. And so I think one of the objectives that we had was to bring people together and let people know about the others in other faculties that were working on similar questions to themselves, so that they could actually engage with each other and hopefully sort of come together on projects to deliver better outputs and better results in terms of answering the research questions they're interested in. And I think that to some extent we've definitely achieved that. So there are a number of examples arising from the seed funding projects where people have continued working together and have applied for follow-up grants or complementary grants to really go into the questions that they're interested in much more depth, and continuing to work together and continuing to sort of generate outputs based on the work that they're doing together. So I think that, I mean, it's very hard to quantify it, and of course we don't necessarily know about all people that have continued doing this, but yeah, we've seen a number of really great examples of this in the Hallmark that I'm really pleased with.
Belinda, I was wondering what worked, or what are you most pleased with at the end of the Hallmark, and what would you not do again, or what would you do differently?
So we've just been talking about the seed funding projects. My most fun part was the seed funding projects. I really loved reading them. I loved awarding them. And in the first round, where we did an early career researcher only focused round, some of the applications needed a bit of work because this was often the first time that researchers or academics had been writing a project. So we got to mentor, each of us got to mentor a project specifically. And so that was a huge amount of fun. And then working with those projects and watching them develop and watching the seminars and the research that came out of them was probably the most fun part. I also really enjoyed the seminars that we ran, particularly ones where we had multiple people talking about the same topic but coming from different disciplines, and then having a discussant sort of talk about that. So I really liked those aspects of it as well. I think the hardest part for us was possibly getting, because our Hallmark was so vague and was spread quite thinly across quite a lot of disciplines, getting specific engagement, getting high turnouts to seminars and other things like that. I think that was our big challenge, was finding topics that were going to be attractive and to get people engaged and to get people in. And so what we were finding is we had tended to attract smaller audiences for the seminars and other things, but then we also had these really highly successful roundtables. So in our final year of the project, we had more of an outreach focus rather than an internal University of Melbourne looking focus, and we sponsored 3 roundtable projects which were outward looking and engaged people from government and industry around different issues and different topics. And so they were quite exciting as well. So yeah, I think overall the most fun parts were probably the seed funding though, but then the seminars and roundtables were also good.
So one of the things I think I found most pleasing is just seeing people collaborating together. And just because that's one part of my own career, which I really enjoy a lot. So I really like working in teams and I like working in interdisciplinary teams, but it's not something that's very common across the university. And so I sort of feel that setting up this Hallmark gave us an opportunity to share with others, sort of the joy of doing that. But it could be a whole range of different things. And the only way you can find out is by listening and talking with each other.
So communication is key in a fruitful collaboration. Belinda, do you have one key takeaway for people who are about to start a interdisciplinary collaboration?
I think I totally agree with Bjorn. I think being open and communication, but I also think communication around boundaries, keeping the project, because if we're talking specifically for ECAs and ECRs, not trying to do too much with the project, having ambitions that are sort of attainable, and you don't have to, just knowing you don't have to do everything, listening, and also, but I also think contributing as well. So when you bring together a team to look at an issue and it's multidisciplinary, that team is together because you all have a certain perspective or a certain way of looking at something. And so not just if you really believe strongly that you're that you have something to offer, making sure that your voice is heard and that you do offer up you know, ideas and suggestions, because that's, like Jon said, that's how you basically develop a stronger research program or a stronger research project, is by bringing together all those ideas into something that's greater than if you'd have just looked at that on your own or just looked at that with somebody in the same discipline. And have fun.